Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Do Good, Feel Good podcast. The topic for today is kindness profitable? Is it profitable for businesses, and is it even worth doing for individuals? And joining us is the expert on this topic, Dr. Patrick Aouad. He is a neurologist. He is the CEO of CU Health, which provides a whole range of different healthcare services for companies to actually care about their people. He's a proud father. He is a good human, most importantly. So Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for coming. I gave you just a little run sheet there. And none of this is scripted, by the way, but what is your proudest moment in your life with all of these things? You've done a lot of good things. What's top of mind?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Top of mind. So, I mean, obviously, like family stuff comes top of mind for me. I think that's just the core of everything I do. It's my center. So I think that my proudest moments are those moments that I've been able to carve out with my brothers, with my parents, my children, having my kids. I think by far. But I think also the times where I've surprised myself by doing things maybe that are not necessarily in the natural programming of things. For example, as a neurologist, you would expect that I, would just do that every day, and I do love that work. I love looking after my patients, but the investment in time usually means that you would just keep doing only that for the rest of your life. I think sometimes when I look back at the risks I've taken to try and contribute in other ways as well, I've been proud of, because there's been no blueprint for that. Actually, one thing that I think of that I'm quite proud of is, this goes back a long way. When I was at uni, we raised money to put a machine in a lab in Manila, in the hospital there. And we did that through running this great event. We had bands. We also then partnered with Rotary. But anyway, at the end of the day, this machine allowed patients in a particularly large public hospital in Manila access to HIV medications. And the reason I'm so proud of that is it was very hard to achieve, and it took a long time and follow through in about 2.5 years. So getting that across the line, it was something we didn't have to do, but we were really passionate about it. I'd worked there, and I'd seen the need for it, and I had a great group of people that got it across the line, good humans. And I think those times I'm so proud of, because you're doing something that makes a difference to so many other people, and you have so much fun along the way, even though it's tough, because of the people you're with. So I got lots of proud moments, but that's a few of them.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. We'll dig into a few of them. But neurology, long journey. Why did you start that journey in the first place?
So I love science. I always have sort of the really basic, I guess, questions around why is the sky blue, and how does a car work, and all those sorts of things. I've always been curious about that sort of thing, and I think that an extension of that was, how does the brain work, really? It's sort of a mystery box, and I wanted to do medicine because it's a mixture of science and helping people, so it sort of combined two things that I really loved, and natural curiosity drew me toward neurology, because I think the brain is a bit of a mysterious organ. It makes a bit less sense than the heart or the bones, sort of they're more intuitive and obvious, but I had this real strong curiosity towards unraveling and understanding neuroscience more. And then that went into, learning more about the diseases of the brain and the nervous system. And so I got to combine all of that, the intellectual curiosity, the ability to help people and be useful, just be genuinely useful in a tangible way. That means something to me. And then through that, I've just met some amazing scientists, doctors, researchers around the world and locally, and I'm really pleased that I pursued that, and it's helped me, I think, in all areas of my career, and in the sort of more business side now, where I'm looking to expand healthcare in new ways.
It's interesting. It's good to actually have the scientist and expert here, because Lisa and I, what we're doing at One Another is around connecting one another, and this concept of giving back, and you do good, you feel good. The stat is 95% of volunteers say helping others help themselves as well. I think that's a pretty layman's way of explaining, do good, feel good. But we have the scientist here. So what is actually the scientific way or workings of this concept, do good, feel good?
Yeah, so I think that at a really fundamental level, we still don't understand exactly why that's the case. But clearly, the data shows that so many different population studies over long periods of time that communities that have purpose, particularly with respect to each other, so there needs to be some connectivity or some sort of accountability between you and those around you in your immediate proximity and in your broader community that drives positivity and drives longevity. It drives positive behaviours. And it really gives people a reason to do things and wake up in the morning and to feel like they've got a fundamental, I suppose, purpose and reason for their existence. And I think that's core to happiness. And it's a real, it really offsets or reduces the risk of mental health issues, because do good, feel good. When you stop on the word feel, so much of what we do is based on the way we feel. I mean, almost everything. Why do we pursue the careers we do and the relationships we do or the decisions we make every day? It's due to the way we feel. Sometimes we're stressed and we go and do the things and that try and alleviate that stress. Now that might be a positive thing. It might be actually addressing the problem head on if possible. It might be exercising, eating well, catching up with friends. It might be a negative behaviour like substance abuse or being in denial of that. And so there's a whole range of ways we deal with things based on the way we feel. It drives everything. And I think that so many studies have shown, and when I say studies, I mean studies that have looked at sort of smaller populations, tribal populations, smaller communities that have tradition. A lot of those things form a glue around a society which then keep it together. And there's a feedback loop that occurs when someone does something for somebody else, and we know this. I mean, Australia's a very charitable country. We feel that, and we see it both that indirect sort of charity where we donate to causes elsewhere, and then when the bushfires come along, we see grassroots, hands-on charity. It makes everybody feel better, and I think that is such a powerful tool, and I think it's understood intuitively, but I think it now needs to be almost systematized, and I don't mean to make it like an engineering thing, like where you take all of the joy out of it, but I think that it's something that needs to be looked at much more carefully by communities, by institutions, by businesses, and lean into that. And I think that the return you can get both from a personal perspective and from a bottom line perspective is infinite. It's amazing.
Well, our ultimate goal, I think in America, they mandate that every single high school student has to do 100 hours of volunteering before they can get their high school certificate. We don't do anything like that here in Australia. We do the Duke of Edinburgh, which I think 5% of people complete. Yeah. It's like, what a way from a government to mandate kindness across the world to inspire and educate our children on the impact kindness can have. Specifically on the neuroscience, so is there not data, I don't know, about helping others or giving back or volunteering around releasing dopamine or what's the other chemical that's good for serotonin? Is there proven scientific research around that concept?
What there is that there are multiple studies that show that the rates of depression, the rates of anxiety in communities that exhibit behaviours that around reciprocity, around giving and receiving to each other, are much lower. So there's much better mental health profiles. Now those mental health profiles correlate with neurotransmitter differences, of course. So if you have less stress, reduced levels of apathy, increased levels of positive energy, positive behaviours, the I guess the extension of that or the understanding of that is that the neurotransmitters and the neurochemicals will be more normalised and more harmonious, and therefore things like burnout are less likely, or feelings of hopelessness are less likely. No, a feeling is underpinned. All feelings are underpinned by chemicals, neurochemistry fundamentally. And we see people try every day to chase a good feeling in whatever way they know how. But you've already hit the nail on the head with what you're doing at one another, with this podcast, with everything. In that there are ways to generate that high. And when we say high, if you look at chemicals and pharmacology, and you look at drugs that can temporarily induce a feeling of relief or euphoria, it's temporary, it's not sustainable, and there's often a fall afterwards. You fall off a cliff emotionally afterwards. What we know is that if you have lifestyles and behaviours in communities, both as an individual and with respect to the people around you, you can generate sustainable levels of those chemical changes which then manifest as far greater positive communities and reduced mental health burden. It's a very real thing.
And in today's world, are we as individual humans going away from these fundamental aspects of community, giving, empathy? Like, what are you seeing in today's climate?
Yeah, I think everyone has an opinion on this. Personally, I'm in a somewhat of a unique position in that, on the one hand, I see patients one-on-one at their most vulnerable and have a lot of very, I suppose, direct and vulnerable conversations. And at another level, as someone that works in a health technology sector and is looking after populations of people and can see the behaviours and needs, I would have to say that, unfortunately, particularly as Western societies evolve to become technology dependent, there is so much choice as to the way we behave. A simple example, I mean, it's you can speak sort of generally, but I reflect on when I was a kid growing up in the 90s. If I wanted to come over to your place, for example, or catch up with you, I'd call your home phone and I'd go, "Oh, hi, Mrs. I. Chris there? Oh, yeah, he's out, he's out the back at the moment. How's your mum?" And you'd have a little chat, and then you'd wait on the phone and you'd come and talk to me. And that would be our time, and then hang up. And in that interaction, I had to be patient. I had to get to know somebody else, your mum, along the way, and be polite and courteous to her. She might ask about how my mum is, and and then I'd catch up with you. We'd think about the most important stuff,
like listening on in the background.
Exactly. Sometimes you hear the other line pick up.
On the other phone.
Exactly. I think that simple example, and you have to choose what you want to talk about in that limited time, because you can't all be on the phone at once. So you might talk about the footy, or you might talk about an exam coming up, or whatever it might be, or a TV show if you watch The Simpsons or whatever, but that's it. And there's something precious about slower interaction, meaningful interaction, purposeful interaction. What social media, and I'm not here to bash social media. I think it has a great, and I saw a recent post of yours, about is life better with social media or not. I think this is an ongoing debate, but I think that people's brains are wired and drawn toward, certain behaviours, and they're drawn toward behaviours that are more addictive, and that's by definition why they're addictive, because they produce dopamine and they produce a reward response in the brain much more quickly. Slower things that take time to build up, don't give the same kickback, the same dopamine kickback. So unfortunately, what's happened is, because we have so much immediate stimulus in front of us now, we go for quick hits, for distraction, for dopamine, whatever it might be, in lieu of a picnic or a conversation with someone, or walking around to their house and catching up. And that's no one's fault. It's just as a result of really rapidly growing technology and the different ways it can be used. So I think that, to come back to your question, I think that all of those distractions and all of those behaviours which we have an inclination toward more are slowly chipping away at, I think, what really, really matters, which are genuine, long-lasting, sustainable relationships, and purpose-driven, longer-term goals as opposed to short-term gratification. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the question of the topic of this is kindness profitable or is kindness beneficial for individuals? Here at One Another, there are all different schemes and scopes of kindness. It could be stopping and smiling at a stranger, stopping and picking up a bit of rubbish, or there's more of the formal kindness, donating clothes to a charity, serving food to the homeless, or there's corporate kindness, which is essentially doing it through your organisation. But here, from a scientific point of view, or just from your point of view, for anyone who is listening, who is sitting on the fence, who is unsure about getting out of their comfort zone, or potentially going to a charity which has been on their mind, but they're doing it alone, so they're scared, or just any sort of doubt about kindness or giving back, what would you say to them?
Look, I would say that for most people, and when I qualify this, most people, over 95% of people that take time out to do something kind, that whole movement, pay it forward, or just taking a moment to say good morning to somebody, the reward that you'll get is difficult to define. But one thing's for sure: if you interact that way, that sense of loneliness, and loneliness is becoming an epidemic, and we can talk about that a bit more in a second, but kindness and mindfulness toward others is one of the antidotes or cures, in my view, to that sense of loneliness and isolation that people feel today. And I think that if we look at our day, in 24 hours, what we're doing and how we're behaving and what we're investing our time, energy and money in, there's always time to be mindfully kind. And there are going to be moments, plenty of moments, where you just don't want to be kind at all, because everybody's in a rush, everybody's tense. Depending on what stage and phase of life you're at, you may be very time poor, interest rates are going up. Well, there's a lot going on in the world. There's conflict in the world. There are so many things to be upset about. But I think in your local community, one of the ways you break down, I guess, a sense of disconnectedness is to just simply be kind, and people will often respond in kind. And that's a feed forward snowball effect.
Yeah.
It's the same with the reverse. If you're unkind, you also get that. And this stuff's age old.
Yeah.
But I just think it's being forgotten behind all of the haste and stress of modern life.
Yeah, and it's karma for our karma squad who's listening.
Yeah.
Karma fuels the good human economy, which is just good people, good charities, good organisations, good humans working together to create this sense of energy transformation, commonly known as karma, which is here long before humans even existed, and energy will be long here after humans even existed. We mentioned that concept of loneliness. 50% of Australians feel lonely at least once a week. And when you think of loneliness, a lot of people in Australia think, oh, that's for old people. 18 to 24-year-olds have the highest percent of this feeling of loneliness in Australia. So it's not just old people. The younger demographic are having this challenge as well. And we at One Another, we view it as not so much, well, it isn't necessarily a challenge, but when you're thirsty, it's your body telling you to drink water. If you're hungry, it's your body telling you to eat food. When you're lonely, it's your body and your mind telling you to surround yourself with other humans and get that human connection. You've heard it here, do good, feel good. From an individual standpoint, the mental health gains are second to none. I want to switch to the business standpoint. Is kindness profitable?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
It's a very interesting question. Lisa and I have always been demonstrating that companies are now slowly transitioning from profits to people. And if you remain at profits, you can work it out the slow way. Customers won't want to buy from you, people won't want to work from you. So we're saying have a people-led culture, which will attract talent, which will retain talent. Again, in simple forms, happy staff are productive staff. But again, you run you're the CEO of CU Health, which provide ranges of services and wellness services to employees to boost their well-being, to ultimately boost the ROI. Is kindness, is wellness profitable for companies, and should they be doing it, and should it be on their radar?
Look, yes. The short answer is yes. I think the challenge is creating a framework that connects abstract concepts like kindness with dollars. And I think on the one hand, even having the conversation denigrates or reduces the beauty of things like kindness, the fact that you even got to talk about economics and dollars. But I think if we want to do a really good job, it's important to do that. And I think that, these kinds of what would be fluffy, intangible concepts used to sit very far away from the boards in companies. Boards look at balance sheets, profit and loss, risks. They make appropriate decisions for the company's future. Boom, move forward. I was thinking about something this morning, knowing that we were going to chat today. I'm a Sydney Swans fan, and last week we lost quite badly. And we've been at the top of the ladder. And I was thinking, these guys have the skills. And yeah, there's some out due to injury, but they've got the skills. And I thought, wonder what it is. I wonder what it is. I wonder what it is and this is the stuff that people don't talk about, because we're talking about performance, right? Performance, whether it's a company, a sports team, it's about performance, it's about runs on the board. I can almost guarantee, and I'm actually catching up with Callum Mills' sister on Thursday, and he's been out because he's been injured, but I can almost guarantee that the reason their performance has been declining is due to stuff off the field and it's to do with the mindset of certain players and possibly things going on in their life that are impacting their well-being. Their mental well-being, their ability to be focused and present and execute. They've done all the training. We know that. And if you extend that metaphor to a company, you're only as good as your weakest link in a company, and often the weakest link can be a whole group of people because they feel unseen, unheard, isolated. And that group can often slow down the rest of the business continuity of a company. They're the ones that HR are having difficulty with, whatever it might be. Now, for a long time, employers have thought, how can we retain talent? How can we incentivize people? And what do they normally do? They normally look at the money, wages. Now, I know this. I know that if you change somebody's salary from $82,000 a year to $85,000 a year, that $3,000 difference, and you pay them fortnightly, that fortnightly payment they get with tax taken out ends up being dissolved, disappears, goes into a mortgage, goes into something. The gratification they get is almost over within 20 minutes of hearing they've got a small pay rise, a few percent difference. If you're kind to that person, you provide them with a team that's motivated to understand the needs of each employee, that can provide framework for purpose and growth, and knows their kids' names and all of that other stuff that doesn't cost much. It costs a bit of time initially, but the upfront investment in listening to people and sharing stories and making that person feel like they're part of a team will pay far more dividends in terms of that person's productivity and the retention of that person than a few $1,000s across a whole year. Now, when you really pause for a second, if you took that $3,000 and you invested it cumulatively across each employee in an organisation in things that we know have evidence with respect to their physical health, their mental health, and their social health, whether that's investing in things like volunteer work, it's investing in stuff like we do, which is evidence-based mental health and physical health services through our platform. You can only imagine it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 1,000 if you do this stuff properly. So I think that the framework, is kindness profitable? Is caring, genuinely caring profitable?
Was being a good human profitable?
I would say that it really is. Now, if you historically being powerful was profitable and having, slaves was profitable, right? So obviously when slaves were the workhorses and the engine of companies, then it was all about who had the most slaves that won. Now, we've moved on well beyond that. And I'm not saying that there are remnants of slavery, but there are remnants of the Industrial Revolution still in companies. There's still this idea of productivity and how many units can you get through at a certain time. We've evolved as human beings in society. Watching the Olympics at the moment, the way countries interact with each other now as a global community has evolved dramatically in the last 60 years. We've come to a new point where we need to evaluate these sorts of things, where AI is now taking over automated jobs. Well, what are you left with? You're left with human capital, and human capital, what makes us different? It's our ability to connect, it's empathy, it's vision, it's creativity, when people are upset, feeling lonely, or their creativity dies. Their ability to care for others dies. They can only just survive for themselves. So I think that there is a real economic argument now to look at this stuff carefully and start putting dollars behind these concepts: caring, kindness, well-being. And the companies that do this are going to be the ones that win. In my view, they are going to be the ones that win and sustain and keep talent and can hit their milestones, whilst others will be scrambling just in an old-fashioned risk mentality.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I think we are still living in the age where we do have to bring everything back to the ROI and the P&L spreadsheet, money, essentially. And I've never understood this concept. It's like I've been in tech sales, I've been in sales my whole career, and a lot of it's based on relatively good base and a lot of good commission. And we get the $5,000 a year or the 5%, I think it's that pay rise. And it's like later in my career, my recent tech company, I try to mandate a minimum of 10% pay rise, minimum, every year. That sounds reasonable with everything going up. And they were gobsmacked. No way, we could never sign that. And I've just never understood, I'm now relatively unhappy and I'm potentially going to leave, and then 6 months of onboarding someone else, that's 150 grand opportunity cost of onboarding, hiring, or just paying me an extra 10 grand a year, which keeps me happy. And there's a lot of pros around that.
Oh, I agree. I agree. As someone that employs people, continuity, when you've got good people, and that continuity of ideas and IP and the way the team works, it just disrupts it. And I think this is basically, it's a short-sightedness of when you lead a company, particularly institutional companies. You might be 3-year CEO, and your job might be to clean up the P&L and show that the bottom line goes up in the time that you're there, and the shareholders are happy about that. So signing off on things like what you just described is difficult, but those things are changing. You see around the world trialing 4-day work weeks. We see huge changes in paternity and maternity leave allowances. We see big changes in investment around. We are seeing big changes in corporate well-being spending and protecting people's health. When companies arrange flu shots for their employees, they're basically saying, don't get the flu because we don't want you to be off work.
I saw you did that for Airtasker.
Yeah, we did. And look, but I think that there's a different level now where brand equity, what a company stands for. The environmental space, ESG, this is a space that we see consumers will buy from companies that resonate with their values. And so whether it's a social value or an environmental value or otherwise, companies are having to think about how they frame their products and how they look after their employees for their investors. This stuff is driven through public relations as much as it's driven through real monetary policy. But fundamentally, I think that what you described before about business continuity, retention, and the employee value proposition, and making sure your tribe, your work community move together. And look, there'll always be difficult staff, and there'll always be wrong culture fits, and you've got to sort that out. But for those that really are all in, give them the best chance possible.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned creating the framework, which I love, and tying everything back to ROI, which I think we do need to do. But generally speaking, when you speak to every boss, every manager, every CEO, this concept of happy employees equals productive employees, right?
Yeah.
You're shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Everyone agrees with that, right? So then why do we then have to build a framework and then show the financial, economic ROI benefits to selling products and services that you're doing, selling products and services that we're doing, that directly and scientifically is proven to increase happiness, which we just agreed equals productivity?
Yeah.
Why is there the need for this complex framework? And that one sentence sums it up.
Yeah, you're right, and actually, the answer I can give you is based on a lot of real life experience. Now, I've seen companies that don't need that; they just get it. They
point me in their direction, please.
They just get it, and often what happens is the chief people officer or the HR function of the company, they obviously get it straight away. They know that if they've got a happy team, they've got no headaches. And if they've got no headaches, they've got no extra recruitment fees, and they don't have to deal with workers' comp claims and all sorts of things, right? It's obvious, you'd think. And the ones that...
Pause.
Yeah. So the ones that get it. And what they do is they go to the board and the CEO and they just sort of say, look, this might be a bit of increased spend, but if you look at the headaches we've had over the last 3 years, this is going to help
reduce. If it just retains one employee, that's your ROI right there.
So I think that where you hit a wall, or at least go through a very, very tight bottleneck, is when you look at a company's profit and loss and you look at what they've been spending on staff to date, they'll say, okay, well, there's wages, and then there's staff amenities, which might be the Christmas party and Friday night drinks or whatever it might be. And then there's another bit which might be EAP, which is totally different because that's a phone line for psychology sort of stuff. And then there might be, some flu shots here and a work health and safety thing here, and it's all disjointed. Now, each one of those lines is usually, for big companies, is governed by one person, a manager. And that manager loves that line. And the CFO loves that line. And they're married to what was it last year, what is it this year? And does it go up or down? Now, a lot of these different things, and no offense to other providers, but a lot of it's just been thrown together over time without there being much thought around the strategy and whether it's actually protecting or making employees happier. So you just land where you are. And if you come in with something that really is going to help transform the culture of an organisation, you have to convince each one of those managers to team up and be like, look, my thing maybe isn't we're not getting ROI on it. I've never really measured it. I just convinced the CEO 3 years ago it was a good contract to sign. And I think the issue is it's more around the sales cycle, budget cycles, stakeholders, the complexity of sign-offs. So it gets lost. The idea makes sense. I think that you're 100% right. The common sense and economics around it make so much sense that you shouldn't need to go down to 1 hour of time back here equals $7 back. You shouldn't need to do that. But I think that we've got to do the dance because everybody makes decisions based on different information, and you need to be able to provide an argument that convinces everybody, unfortunately. Enterprise sales. So what would I say? I would say that if you can get the board to understand it and the decision makers, then you get a bit of downward pressure, which can get the team together, and you don't have to chase everyone around the company.
That's my next question. We're talking about doing the dance, enterprise sales. Why not go directly to the CEO?
Well, I mean, if you can, you should.
Yeah.
If you can, you should. And I think, and look, again, CEOs that have experienced either in their life a crisis or a mental health crisis or something in their own personal world, or they've worked with companies that are actually ahead of the curve and get this stuff, they're receptive to this. So I do think, companies that are using evidence to put together products, services, tools, platforms for employees that are easy to use, easy to roll out, and will genuinely help retain talent and reduce risk of mental health issues, reduce risk of staff loss. And I think we need to sort of group together and appeal to leadership in companies and say, look, this is the next step. It is the next step. And I'm seeing in our company, surely, like not even slowly but surely, now it's happening quickly. Companies that are putting their head in the sand they're falling behind. They're losing the talent. And I'm actually seeing leaders move companies to progressive companies and then reach back out to us and say, I'm now at a place that gets it.
Get it.
Yeah. So look, I think it is happening. We've just got to stay at it.
Yeah. It's interesting. From another point of view, the problem we're solving is employee volunteering rates sit around 15%. So that is millions and millions of people and hours that are going to waste each year, and they're essentially getting paid to go and volunteer because it's on corporate time, which is going to waste.
Yeah.
Why? It's too hard. So for us, I'm a pretty simple thing. It's like, okay, well, let's make it easy. Imagine the collective positive impact we as corporate Australia have if we used 100% of those hours. Why? People who do good, they feel good. Why is that important to the company? Happy staff equals productive staff. Everyone shakes their heads and agrees with that. The biggest challenge we're facing is just speeding things up.
Yeah.
Typically that in companies' eyes are perceived as a low priority. And especially now around the last 6 months and the current climate where redundancies are high, people are just trying to get their paycheck and their day job, which I completely 100% understand and aligned with. But one could also argue now is more of an important time than ever for team culture, team camaraderie, for bringing that human connection, that sense of purpose, that sense of happiness at the workplace. So we're loving the journey and we're working it out, and ultimately our purpose is to directly measure the impact giving back and employee volunteering has on wellness, has on productivity, has on ROI at the company. You're likely doing all of that through your employee benefit programs and your products matching employees with different wellness providers, whether that's helping parents, whether that's helping people go through sleeping disorders, eating disorders, a whole bunch of different custom wellness providing options. What in your journey have you seen as the biggest challenge of getting buy-in for your amazing product?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is actually I just want to comment on, your mission. You made a comment, people are just trying to get that paycheck and survive. And I think when you're trying to survive, you're kind of in what we call fight or flight mode. And when you're in fight or flight mode, you put the fire out that's right in front of you. You don't take a step back and think, what can I do for my soul that's going to help me cope with it? Most people don't anyway. Some people are much better at it than others and can take a moment and reevaluate but most people don't. And so that's why it takes really strong leadership. But I agree with you. I think that in companies where there's these volunteer days built into the P&L, much like sick days are built in and personal leave and so forth, what you think as a manager is you don't want anybody to take a day off because you want them on the tools. But
day off.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be, because it's a real opportunity for it to be a team building day. One of the key things that makes people productive is the way they work together. If you do something like volunteer together and you get that personal, beautiful feeling of when you pick up rubbish on the beach, which actually is a great thing to do, or you help people that are vulnerable or whatever it might be, the feeling you get is it's a unique. It really is a unique feeling. I don't think it's replaceable by any other. Or I think it's a specific feeling that humans are wired to feel, but our modern society doesn't encourage it as much. So I think there needs to be a movement toward leadership in companies saying, look, once a quarter, the third month's Thursday is volunteer day. They can work out how to do it but it's just built in. Everyone knows they rock up, they wear their running shoes, whatever, and they go. And I think it would really pay dividends, literally, not just metaphorically. Literally, I do, and I really do, and I hope that one employer that listens to this just does that. From our side, what have we? So we can be really specific about where our platform and product sits. So to be really specific about it, we provide essentially a virtual access or a digital environment that allows employees to access general practice services, dietitian services, psychological services, which are our most commonly used service, health coaching, a whole performance coaching, a whole raft of things. But ultimately, all of our providers work together in a way that creates an outcome or toward an outcome for the employee. So it's not like a transactional marketplace. It's very much around, look, if Sarah's an employee, she wants to plan a family, that's her current priority in her life. She's got anxiety about being a mum. She wants to know what her options are. There might be mental health services required. There might be some medical services required. Our team will coordinate through the platform to offer that care for that employee, which is a huge relief. It means she doesn't have to run around in business hours, going here, going there.
Work is helping her find that solution.
Correct. Okay, so you can put that out to everything: chronic pain, stress and anxiety, cancer screening. So our service offers
flu shots,
all of that, so that it makes it efficient. It also is outcomes focused, not just service focused. It's very outcomes focused. And the reason that we've gained traction is because we are genuinely evidence-based and healthcare led, in that there's nothing gimmicky whatsoever about it. It is hardcore, but it's wrapped up in a vehicle that's easy for anyone to use, whether you're 18 or you're 65. You'll find what you need in there from a health and wellbeing perspective. Now, traditionally, what companies did is they would have employee assistance programs, which are there as a compliance tick box. If you're really at a crisis, at a knife's edge, you can call. And during the pandemic, we saw those services utilised more because people were really struggling. But those services are not proactive services. They're really there as a last resort, and they're not healthcare providing type services. Then a lot of other companies try other stuff. They've got, mindful, they've got meditation, yoga. They might do some other physical, might do annual health checks. Maybe there's gym memberships for people who like the gym. So what we sort of have done, some companies even subsidise private health insurance for their employees, which is part of healthcare. What we've sort of done is said, look, we've got a platform that will cater for so many different needs, easily customizable for the employee, and potentially is a good replacement for lots of your employee perks, which people don't use, or there are others you're paying for, and it's just like you're paying for it, but you're losing it. It's just money out the door. So, and also with EAP, we're sort of saying, well, look, we can move beyond that now and proactively prevent depression, burnout, anxiety. So you keep people well. And I think what you're doing is actually going to help keep people well. Fundamentally, when I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm a neurologist. I work with a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists, but I can't speak as them. But one thing I know for sure is that when you look at when our psychologists are talking to people about their sense of maybe isolation, loneliness, sense of helplessness, potentially they're developing quite significant depression. One of the key things that we talk about, and clinically, is do you belong to any community groups? Do you ever do any volunteer work? Do you feel like you belong to any particular group? Do you have the supports you need? So much of it's like going for a walk in nature. That's going to help you far more than a tablet, often for prevention, and it's much cheaper. So I think these things all work in synergy together. But the way we've got traction is because we sort of fit, I think, nicely in an area of need that companies really have recognised as important, the well-being of their employees, and there's tangible extensions of that for that impact, or that ROI. So we were talking before about how our framework really revolves around things like we mentioned, helping retain your staff, helping attract talent, helping reduce workers' compensation claims, either through increasing people's physical resilience, or increasing their mental resilience, or protecting them from mental health strain and stress through work by providing them with the skills and expertise to do that. We also look at, so aside from retention, we look at sick days even. We look at, some companies, some employees are doing it pretty tough, physically, mentally, or otherwise. Maybe there's chronic pain, migraines, whatever it might be. Our service can help reduce that burden, and people are taking fewer sick days, so they're on the tools more. Now, if they're happily doing it, it's a win-win. So we also see that as a reason. It might also be because, companies are hunting down to be employer of choice. They want to be employer of choice, and they're in that game, and the tech companies and the legal firms are all trying to get the best talent. So it all feeds back to that as well. And there's also legal requirements. So that now, as of 2023, there's a mandate for listed companies and large organisations to have psychosocial safety tools and frameworks for every company, and they need to demonstrate they've got them. So that if somebody does say, look, I've been placed under significant mental health strain, a company has to demonstrate that they've got good, robust, proactive measures in place to reduce that risk. So we've got a bit of tailwind with respect to where things are going. Again, I think that's where what you're doing, it needs to feed into that and not just be a separate thing. It needs to be part of the overall psychosocial safety side and demonstrate that volunteer work is part of the solution.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A big thing that we talk about is this proactive or reactive nature to mental health. And mental health, I think everyone can agree, whether it's just more awareness, but it's heading in the wrong direction. We have suicide, anxiety, loneliness, depression, all going up, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. We've done a few podcasts on those reasons. But essentially, we have a lot of great charities in Australia in particular who are trying to help that, but they are reactive solutions. Perfect example, Lifeline. No discredit to Lifeline whatsoever.
Amazing,
please don't get me wrong. They have about 400,000 people who call Lifeline every single year for a chat, generally speaking. That's after they're having mental health challenges. Band-Aid. How do we prevent 400,000 people to call Lifeline so Lifeline doesn't exist? That's where my mind goes.
Yeah. It's a huge, saying it's an area of need is a huge understatement. The flow-on effects. I was talking before about the footy score, right? Yeah. And my bet would be that someone's or a few people's heads are not in the right space. And we'll talk about injuries and we paint it up as this, and someone's out, and the line. At the end of the day, the way you feel mentally, you feel strong, positive, energetic, purpose-driven, community-focused, and you have that every day. You're just going to be like cloud nine, happy. And what you described with the stats, I mean, when you look at any point in time, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 people are suffering with a mental health disorder or diagnosis that they're going to either need long-term or intermediate-term counselling for and or medication. Right? And then throughout someone's lifetime, 1 in 2 people throughout lifetime will have at some point had an extended period of mental health symptoms that would have either classified them as having a specific diagnosis or impacted their ability to deliver on the things they should be doing every day, which is go to work, be part of their family, interact with them. Now, is it normal to suffer in life? Absolutely. I mean, the human condition since the beginning of time has been fraught with suffering. It's not like a stress-free life is a normal human life. We know that. I don't think we can create a life. If it was completely stress-free, we'd be all depressed. I think that stress and some relativity around good days, bad days, sadness, grieving, the pressure to provide, the pressure to survive is part of feeling like you're alive. But there's a point on the curve where you fall off it, and even on days where the sun's up and you've got your family around you, you can't even feel it. You're numb to it, and that's when it becomes a problem, a significant problem. And you could go, and you've done podcasts, and this, as you said, there are many reasons that's becoming more of a problem. But at the end of the day, it needs to be solved, or at least attempted to be prevented. And I think that the solutions are broad, but I think that a lot of them are community-based. We know that our mental health framework and systems are strained. Mental health services, both outpatient and inpatient mental health services, are strained. There is lots of work that we see the government trying to do and local branches trying to improve, but ultimately it's an economic problem. So the solution actually lies in community. And it lies in things like organisations and whether that's the companies, whether it's the suburbs we live in and our neighbours and our mates. It's all of that. And I think rather than leaving it to chance, we can put some guidance around it so that, Lifeline isn't being hit with 400,000 calls a year. And I think it's a sum of all of the parts. It's having proactive approaches to helping people with their sleep and reducing if they've got significant problems with the way that they use social media. If they've got problems around, social anxiety, because they just, a lot of teenagers, 15, 16, 17-year-olds during the pandemic, they didn't go out at all. And all they had was their phone to create community. And I think that they're a very resilient generation in a different way. But I think as time goes on, and you look at our society now, cost of living is high. And if you go back to, and obviously we went around, but I hear them say that generations prior, you grew up, you bought a house, you had a family. That was the formula you followed, right? And kind of you tick those boxes off, and maybe you fit into that formula and maybe you didn't. But it was very traditional and predictable. Now, it's a mystery box. It's a mystery challenge. Life is a mystery challenge. Everyone's trying to find their identity and purpose. Super hard. And I think the only way through that is through community time. It's through connecting with people that are like-minded so that you don't feel alone. And then it just adds, you know who to call, you know who to speak to. And so I think that preventing or proactively preventing it comes down to things like CU Health, which empower companies with tools and a platform that easily allows access to services before it's a problem. Right, that's our thing. You're trying to make something that is so intuitively and instinctively real, community, giving back, helping out people in need, helping out the environment in need. You're trying to systematize that in a way. Like you get out there and you do it. I don't want to be told to volunteer, but it's funny. You tell someone to, you force them to, and then the next time they volunteer to volunteer, right? But you're trying to make it so that empower that sort of. So I think, it will be just 1% here, 1% here, and we just have to keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting, just wrapping things up. We've always been preaching, you do good, you feel good. We have Patrick, who's the expert, a doctor in neuroscience, who has just come in and articulated the benefits from the individual and the power giving back and community connection have. In summary, you help someone else climb a mountain, you too will reach the top. As from the individual point of view, we spoke about from a business point of view, is kindness profitable? And I think we can all agree that businesses that are slowly transitioning from profits to people will be thriving and succeed in the long run. People only want to work with other good humans. Customers only want to work with other good customers. So that transition is happening. We are both trying to do it from a wellness, improving well-being point of view. But just finally, one last tip for anyone who's listening. You mentioned managers. Potentially all they have to do is take a breath and a step back. Is there anything you recommend to any business owner or senior leadership to just review their wellness culture and one thing that they can potentially do to take a step back and review it?
Well, I would say that, and I think managers, and these are the larger companies, know this. I think you know if you're in a compliance, fight or flight, tick box mentality, or in a future facing, more aspirational, where do we want to end up mentality. They're two different headspaces. And I would say some people are naturally in the more where do we want to end up mentality, and others are just trying to clear their inbox, right? I would say to those that are just trying to clear their inbox, that's a very stressful way to live. You know, it's a very, and if it's just going to be that in perpetuity, what's the point? So I would say that to all managers of teams, maybe just take a moment sometime over the next couple of weeks to think about what you could do for your team that may not immediately solve a problem or put a fire out, but might prevent fires in future. The kinds of things you would do for your family or your friends that's intuitive outside of work, just try and incorporate that in work for once and see what happens.
Yeah, love it. Is kindness profitable and beneficial? The expert, Dr. Patrick, says yes. We definitely say yes. You do good, you feel good, it's simple as that. Thank you for tuning in, thank you for listening. We'll have more information on both of ourselves and platforms and products in the show notes. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, brother. Loved it.